There we go. We are recording. Jamie, it is good to see you again, by the way. I'm very happy to see you
Nice to
again.
see you. Nice to see you. I like your cap.
Thank you. Thank you. This is actually EX stands for Exosia, and it's the very big fantasy world that I've been building for about 17 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
little self promo. I like it.
Wasn't expecting it. I just like the hat. I like to wear stuff
No,
that
it
I
is a
like.
cool hat. I've been wearing
Yeah,
a
my
black
wife.
hat myself. It's been very rainy here in California, and I've been wearing black hats in the rain.
I love it. I love it. So, Jamie, I mean, you have done a lot in a lot of different areas. I actually think that you probably have some pretty good insight on just kind of the state of the digital world. And I'm not talking about like in a cheesy sense, but like in social media, in the marketing that you've done, in kind of the transformation you've seen, because you've seen a lot that has changed over the years. Do you think that where we're going with social media, do you think it's headed in a good direction?
That's a great question. It's a little bit loaded because I think last week was the congressional hearings with the heads of Snap, TikTok, Meta, etc.
Yeah.
And it is alarming with teen suicides. I saw Professor Scott Galloway, who is a
Yes.
guy I follow who's quite up on these things, talking about the responsibilities of these companies to moderate these platforms. And the challenging part was using AI, which is much more cost efficient. I guess what he was talking about was a teenage girl was discussing suicide, and the algorithm delivered suicidal content, not help for people contemplating suicide. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
real misfire. So those sorts of things, I don't even think those are the extreme. I think those are very real, and I think they're more common than we realize. And there are a lot of people with a lot of mental health challenges, and I don't think social media helps, but social media is a great place to.
I'm learning that, and you know what's so funny is that it's like when you don't go through it, it's really hard to be consciously aware of how bad a problem is, and then when you start to dig it up, you start to realize like, wow, this is so much greater of a problem or a need than I ever realized. Like um, you hear people who have terminal illnesses all the time or different types of chronic sickness. But if you're healthy, it's just really hard to comprehend what that means. And then, like, for instance, my wife has had some medical problems for about 2 years now. And then it was like eye opening. I was like, wow, I really had no clue. I have empathy and I care about others, but I just had no clue how serious or how hard this situation can be. And then what I'm learning with social media, as I'm doing more of the Digital Dilemmas podcast, diving into it more, we're building a platform. And so I wanted to be very thorough. I knew it was bad. I did. And I think all of us inherently know it's not good. And then we start to uncover it, and you're like, oh, this is really bad, way more common than I ever thought it was.
Yep. So, but these things are slippery slopes, and for for all the mental health challenges, and for all the internal conflicts it creates with a lot of us, the cognitive dissonance, the confirmation bias, us searching out others that confirm our biases, because
Mm-hmm.
we all have a bias. We all come from a different
Absolutely.
POV. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we'll find the social media that confirms our biases. And then we become more aligned with people that might be a little more extreme in these sentiments than, and it goes to both sides. But so, yes, there are the mental health aspects of it. They worry me. I'm a father of a teenage daughter, and I see it take a toll on her and her friends. But at the same time, I look at the other side of this coin, and there are a lot of affirmations, positive affirmations every day. There's a lot of joy and a lot of laughter and a lot of connection. And there's a lot of relatability to people's posts as well. So I'm not going to say, I think we can fix it. I think we can get things to where there's a balance, and people seeking mental health advice and comfort can get that, and people seeking joy can find that.
So it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like essentially it's more about making social media relevant to the person versus the way that is intentionally designed, which is We don't really care about you, Jamie. We don't really care about your daughter. We just want to make sure you're on the app as long as possible, consuming as much. I mean, that's the truth, right? If you look at,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever pulled back the way that the algorithms work and their coding and their structures. I mean, they are intricately, intelligently designed. It's like when we found out how casinos were designed. And then we realized, like, it wasn't haphazard, and this wasn't your average hotel. These were incredibly meticulously designed institutions for a purpose. They have a sole purpose, and so that was kind of one of the big things. Is that I kind of always had this. Maybe it's me being foolish and naive, but I've always looked at Zuckerberg, and I try to believe the best. And so I always kind of looked at it like maybe he's just making mistakes because this is really hard. But then it's just like every year, more, not less, more information is being coming to light from old to new that is showing the intentionality of certain practices, negative practices, say. And it makes it kind of hard to be like, man, how do you kind of not turn around and say, are you really doing this on purpose?
Well, you could go from anything like foodstuffs, McDonald's, cookies, saccharin, sugar, sweet, up to social media. Addiction is the business. Cigarettes, addiction is their business. So if you're going to addict people, you have to be responsible about it. I think we see a lot of public service announcements from alcohol companies saying drink responsibly. They realize there has to be some ethical outlet, right? So some ethical, some conscious effort to play both sides. We see that ethically. So
we see it as a response to getting in trouble, right? Like
it is
cigarettes, right? Cigarettes, man, those things. I mean, the ads that add cigarettes, doctors recommend cigarettes for your health and crazy stuff like that. And then at some point they go, cigarette companies, you can't do that. And they go, well, we don't want to lose our customers. We don't want to get kicked out of the states or the counties or the nations that we're permitted in. So we're going to play ball. We're going to play ball.
And Americans don't like to be told what to do.
We don't.
It's so you got that too, right? They don't tell me to vaccinate. Don't tell me to wear a helmet. Don't tell me, not to smoke. I'm going to do what I want to do. Don't tell me not to drink.
It's such a hard thing too, because while I do believe there's a level of intentional manipulation that happens in pretty much every single industry. I mean, it's just pretty evident in my opinion. I think there is also to say content moderation at the scale and frequency as it exists in social media. It's so different than TV and movies, where everything is pre-made. And it goes through, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of people are involved in the process of making a singular piece of content, a movie, a TV show. There's room to be able to sit back and say, what are we going to do? Is this appropriate? Does this meet guidelines? Does it follow the rules? While you and I could say anything we want, and it might, sometimes the algorithm, right, and AI and is going to catch it. Savvy humans are very good at getting around the rules. I mean, we're really, really good at it. And so I do think there's a level that it's like, how do you moderate this many people? How do you do that without taking away, without being the overlord censors,
Well, they got to get better at it. They're certainly making enough money. And, right, they have the R&D, and I'm confident they'll get better. And I think the horse is out of the barn. We can't pull this stuff back. We've got to make it better and move on. And that's the way I feel. I teach marketing communications at Loyola Marymount University. And a lot of, I talk about digital media, and I talk about the evolution of media from one place to another, from one era to another. And I'm seeing that my students' eyes are glossing over because they only know this world. They don't even talk to me about pre-internet. They were born after the internet, my students. So spare me the history lesson. Let's talk about, how we're going to get this right. And, cutting the cord and these terms are really uninteresting to them.
Yeah.
But one of the ethical things, this may be a little heavy for the podcast. one of the ethical things we talk about ethics in marketing, and propaganda is pretty powerful, right? And we talk. Absolutely. One of the case studies we explore is TikTok being owned by a Chinese company. Mm-hmm. And I asked my students. We do a poll. We talk about the ups and the downs of, are they comfortable with, because the U.S. government's not comfortable with it, with the Chinese companies getting all this personal data on users in America. And most of them aren't that concerned, my students, and they think that their data is everywhere anyway, and that they're...
Yeah, I've heard that before. Sure.
Yeah. So out of the 30 students I have every semester, I'd say 28 of them could care less.
So how do you feel about that?
So this is not, this is put conspiracies and all these other things. What really happens when we see the power of TV outlets, we see the power of newscasts, we see the power of pundits, and we see a certain, the word I'm looking for is an impressionability. Humans are impressionable people. You could say they're gullible, you could say whatever they are, but they're impressionable. So when they see a lot of a certain message, it leaves an impression. And so these feeds that are controlled by people, they have control over the algorithm.
By the way, let me give you proper context, because I know that things can get taken out of context. Assuming that it's true, regardless of what government it is, because to be honest, the point is that a government that is not our own, and even then, our own government.
Yes. Let's just pretend it's XYZ.
That's right. The government
comes from this place. They have control of that algorithm.
Yes.
And the kind of messaging that is fire hosed into the users. So whenever that can happen, you have the potential for swaying mass opinion. That's undeniable. We've seen it throughout history. And so it's not conspiracy. It's just what happens when you see one message all the time. Propaganda is powerful.
Power. I mean, it's obviously it's something you need to talk about, you need to address, but at the same time, we also can sit back and say, okay, but remember that this is not some new thing. TikTok is not the first company in the world who has used their influence, their money, to do what they want. Every company, for the most part, every major company out there that has power uses their power to influence others to do what they want, whether that's behind the scenes and you don't see, or it's in the front. There's got to be some level of kind of like, okay, but like, and again, I'm one of those people who believes in the privacy and the protection of data, but I believe it in the sense of like, I have the right to know and I have the right to opt out. It's not necessarily that I'm always opposed to sharing my data. I'm not, obviously, because I do. So I really can't care that much if I don't do anything about it. But I believe that there was this huge push of data collection that came over the last 5 to 10 years with very little explanation of what was going on and who was getting it. I mean, I had no idea when I started putting my email in something that it really meant that for the rest of my life, that email would be sold to 1 million different people, and that those people, they would take the email, use that to then find my name to find my address and my phone number. And now I'm not just getting the spam emails, I'm getting phone calls, and I'm getting and that it's like it reminds me of when my wife was was given a prescription and the doctor had failed to tell her of the side effects. And then when she came off the subscription, it was worse than the effects that the prescription was supposed to be helping her with. And it was like, you really should have told us. Even if we were still going to do it, it would have been nice to know what we were getting ourselves into. I could have asked. My wife could have asked. So there is self-responsibility. We have to be responsible. We have to say, well, what could I have done better? Man, come on. Like, at some point, it was like, what is going on? What are you doing with my information?
It's a good analogy. It's a great analogy. You could suffer these side effects once you put your email address in this field.
It's just, I mean, would you agree? Like, it is absurd how far they take this email, how far they take that.
Well, they've gotten rid of cookies. Cookies are being sunsetted. Mm-hmm. So a lot of I don't know what this first party data, I don't know who's going to control it, but that's kind of a hot potato with digital companies as well.
Yeah.
And so going back to, anyway, those, the data, the power of these digital platforms, the sway and the influence that they have on people, the influencers themselves, hey, it's out there, and hopefully we can help people cope with the downside of them and help people understand the upsides.
I think for me, I look at it and I don't know if it's one of those things where it's a too broke to fix type of situation. I kind of look at it the same as the national debt. And I'm like, if we did everything right for the next 100 years, could we actually catch up? Could we actually put ourselves, I mean, if we did it, we just all, as a country, we just became so wise.
Austere.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we just Warren Buffett our lives,
Right.
from top to the bottom. We just Warren Buffett everything. We just make the greatest plays imaginable. Could we really feasibly make up for the last 100, 200 years of, arguably I'd say the last 100 years have been the worst for our financial. I mean, a lot of that, the Great Depression, good things that were tried during the Great Depression ended up becoming long-term abuses. And that's really hard, right? In state of emergency, and then the emergency's over, and then somehow we're going down a path that we're not meant to go. So I think, like, okay, could we really, or is it a burn it to the ground, right? If you remember Ron Paul, he was an extremist to most, and he said, well, you want to fix the national debt? I mean, cut everything. And he's like, you can't, because the moment you keep one thing, guess what comes with that? 2 other things that support the one thing. And then you support those 2 things, and guess what? They need to be supported by 3 other things. I mean, I've heard people turn around and say, well, the reality is that we don't actually have to pay back any of our debtors. We don't have to pay back China because China can't pay back us, and China can't pay Russia. And you could just turn around and say, you know what, China? We're not going to pay you anything anymore. We're done. You think China's not going to still sell products to us? They're one of their largest exporters. And I'm not talking about foreign policy.
No.
What I mean,
Yeah.
Context of social media is, okay, is it it's all bad, burn it to the ground, build something new? Is it fix and kind of do the best we can? Because for all we know, maybe Zuckerberg really is trying. Maybe he is actually trying to make it better.
I believe he is. I mean, I think it's in the interest of shareholders, which drive the stock market, which drive a big part of the economy. He is trying. Now, as a shareholder, full disclosure, I look at my voting, my quarterly voting ballots for these public companies, Amazon, Apple, Meta. And if you read those, you'll look at what you hear on the news is, we're going to cut down on our carbon footprint. We're going to reduce the amount of waste. We're going to reduce the plastic. We're going to strive to have perfect diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to have equal pay for the gender gap. Then when you get that private ballot for you as a shareholder, the board recommends against every one of those.
Are you serious?
So I'm not joking. And so I look at it and I go, holy God, this is not what they tell the public. And the board's like, that would be too expensive. We recommend against it. That would be too expensive. Let's recommend it. So,
you know what that kind of reminds me of is WGA strikes. And then Bob Iger says the expectations of the pay they want is unrealistic. And then totaling his bonuses, equitable shares in the company, and his actual salary, it was $580 million. And I just almost look at that and I go, that doesn't really match up, to be honest, when it comes down to looking at the facts. Like, I don't get it, man. I don't get it. And it's kind of weird to me. And, I have read stories, because I can't say I've ever owned a Fortune 500 company. So I want to be humble here. I have read stories of really honest, good CEOs who have boards that are made of really, really greedy people. And so they get put into a position. It's like the president at times. People think that the president should just snap his fingers and do whatever he wants. But the thing is that there are other branches of government that prevent him from doing anything should they choose it. And so it's a very difficult process. And if Congress hates what the president decides, it's probably not going to happen. It's just probably not going to happen. And so maybe Zuckerberg is like, guys, I really want to fix these things. And he's with the people, But the board says, we don't really care about you and what you want. We care about the numbers. And the numbers say that these things that you believe would be good changes, you believe that would be positive for us, they don't check out math. The math doesn't check out. We don't like it, right? Because it reminds me of Jay Leno. Jay Leno, when he was running his show, it's a positive to him. They were going to lay off a bunch of people, potentially even cancel the show. So they're all sitting in a room, you know, the big guys, but they also had even just some of the PAs and stuff like that. He said, guys, you know, we're going to have to lay off most of you to keep the show going. And Jay Leno said, well, I make $30 million a year on the show. How about I make $15 million a year on the show, and we spend the other $15 million keeping everybody here? And he's like, I didn't want to do it. He's like, I still make $15 million a year just from the show. At some point, you kind of look at that and you look at the boards and you look at Meta making $100 billion. You go, you know, at some point.
So this is you're right. So there's a giant gap, and I'm going to bring up the most boring point of it, but it's, again, in ethics. I talked to my class about CEOs. CEOs are a marketplace. CEOs are a marketplace, and they're going to work for whoever the highest bidder is. And there are more qualified CEOs than there are jobs. So it's a musical chairs game. You'd think because there are more qualified CEOs that they wouldn't have to pay these exorbitant salaries to have these people come in. That is the disconnect for me. You can find plenty of very qualified CEOs without paying what they're demanding, right? But I talked to my class. You have a CEO of a nonprofit, a big nonprofit. One doesn't come to mind, but they have to pay that CEO of that nonprofit $7 million a year for a nonprofit. You're thinking, well, that's not going to the charity. But the truth is, to get that CEO from another well-paying job that's not in an NGO or a nonprofit, they've got to pay a competitive salary. Mm-hmm. So this is about competitive salaries, and that's why they pay these guys so much money. If Iger's not at Disney, he goes to Paramount. He goes somewhere else.
Because it's not even just, hey, we need this guy here to help us. It's also, we can't afford to have him at our competitors.
Sure, that too. And
right, like in sports, right? Leadership. Sometimes they don't. Teams have talked about this. Coaches have talked about the fact that they're like, we weren't sure that this individual was the best person for the team, but we absolutely knew that if they were on someone else's team, they'd be a problem.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with guys making a lot of money. I have a problem with a lot of money when their companies aren't making a lot of money.
I want to give a shout out to a billionaire I've had the pleasure of meeting a few times and having some conversations. And I remember listening to him one time, Glenn Samford of eXp Realty. And he is a billionaire. And he started a company. And he has a policy where they give 50% profit away back to the agents that are with him. And I'm fumbling on the words, guys, don't hate me.
You told me about that. Great model.
Brilliant model. And one day he was asked, he said, why did you do that when you didn't need to? Nobody else was doing that. Nobody else was doing even remotely close to that. And he said, because even when I give away that much, I'm still a billionaire. And it's just like, dude, like, you're still a billionaire. That's right. You can be incredibly benevolent and generous and still be absurdly wealthy. It's okay. It's okay to give. Like, I don't know. For me, I find fulfillment. One of my greatest joys about, and maybe it's because I was homeless at one point, and I've also just, I've been poor for many parts of my life. And then when I started actually making good money, it was the first time in my life where I wasn't a beggar. I could actually help people with medical bills and Uber driver, give him $100 tip, which to me was not an absurd amount of money, but to him it was like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe. And in my brain, I'm like, why wouldn't I though? If I can reasonably, always within reason, right? Don't be a fool, be wise with your money. But if you can make an impact and it's so small on your side of things, like, all right. So fun question for you, Jamie. I love to ask this question. You could, if you could have no problems with money or regulations, anything like that, all that, no boards, everybody's all full sale, you can do whatever you want. What changes would you make personally in social media? Like, let's say, Facebook or anywhere, it doesn't matter.
I'd probably try to regulate it the way we discussed. I would try to help people who have mental health challenges, and I would try to moderate, make sure that the algorithms weren't loaded.
So they are.
You know, I guess the biggest, yeah, they are. I don't know. You know, the minute you start tinkering, I'm sure they're doing a lot more than we're aware of to try to fix these businesses. But I know that when I send an Instagram clip to my children, they get annoyed with me and they don't open it up because it changes their whole algorithm on what they see. And they don't want to see my old fuddy-duddy content mess up their algorithm. So
That's
you know,
funny. That's honestly very funny.
it is. And it's,
Dad, stop invading my timeline.
yeah, I don't want to see your old 80s rock bands. I'm not into it. So
that's pretty funny.
Yeah. So people are that stream is actually being, you know, every user is voting for what they like by the way they swipe.
I wonder if getting away, obviously I have a personal bias here, but getting away from the likes and view counters. So I've been, we're building what we're building, you know, I've been talking to more and more influencers to understand the good, the bad, the ugly, right? I feel like the successful ones are probably very well in tune with both sides of the world of social media. I found that a lot of them have severe depression and anxiety based off of just likes and comments. And it's because their wealth and their whole value is wrapped up in whether they're socially accepted, or rather their content is socially accepted. And the only way they know it's socially accepted is by those likes and views, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you go and make a wonderful comment, but 10,000 other comments are negative. They will naturally, it's not even a judgment to them, assume that what they put out there is bad or unworthy or whatever. And because we tie it to that versus tying it to different things that are better depiction of who we are and the value of who we are. For instance, like you'll see an Amazon or like I play video games. And so you have like somewhere like Steam and you go and people leave reviews. I've seen people leave reviews for a game that they didn't buy, were annoyed, an ad for it popped up in their feed. Man, if you read some of the negative comments people have left for people, this has nothing to do with what you just saw. You were just here to unload on someone. You were just here to have a target. And I wonder if going to a place of where we're focused more on the relevancy of what we put out than the popularity of what we put out. Because we put a competition against each other in the sense that it is about popularity, but nowhere else in life does that actually make sense for the most part, unless you're directly correlating it to, like, let's say ticket sales or something like that. But for the most part, for the average person and even most above average people, popularity rarely factors into what they do on a daily basis. It's rather performance. Can they deliver the results in the specified areas they're meant to? Can I be a good husband to my wife? Can I be a good father to my children? It's not whether all the kids on the block think I'm a good father to my children. It's only whether those who are relevant to me and I relevant to them that they decide. And I wonder, what if we moved social media away from a popularity measure to a relevancy measure, where everything was based on how relevant it is to you, and that's what you saw, and that's what you interacted with, and that's what was voted on. It had nothing to do with likes or those types of counters.
Because it's in the zeitgeist right now. I don't really care what a beer drinking football consumer, NFL consumer, what he thinks about Taylor Swift. I don't care. I care what my daughter thinks about Taylor Swift. That's relevant to her.
Yes.
She's not just taking a shot at it. It matters. So I think those are the people Taylor Swift cares about. I do believe that.
Oh, she does. I don't listen to her music, but I have the utmost respect for Taylor Swift. She is a legend, and she is just incredible. And I'm glad she exists. I'm glad that she's out there doing what she does. I mean, that girl has moved the needles on entire economies, and she is amazing. And she has, I would argue, largely used her platform. And there's people who disagree because, she expressed her political opinion one time. Listen, she's not perfect. And also, she's allowed to express her political opinion. I mean, I think there's a level of grace we have to have there. She's generally not nasty about it. She's generally not awful about it. We have seen stars out there who have done really terrible things, still love them. But then the moment she does even the tiniest little thing that, as grown men, speaking to the men who get offended, we shouldn't even be fazed by these silly, petty little things. And here we are whining and crying and complaining.
Thanks for saying that. Thanks for saying that. I just, somebody said something that left an impression on me, and it was, you judge people by their petty grudges. I don't have time for it myself, so. But.
I think she's awesome. And in fact, I think she's a great example. Oh, yes.
Well, we were talking about relevance is where we came off.
Yes.
Why it mattered. And I brought her up only because she cares about so if you could put a metric in that helps social media, and the people that are leaving an impression on people on social media know that they're scoring high on a relevance score and not on a broad score, more on a vertical score with their core, that would be very interesting. But you obviously know the hurdle, and the hurdle is, if you sell bagels and you put them into a storefront, and you go into that storefront and you see that your bagels aren't being bought, it's sad. And that's the equivalent of not getting follows.
I agree.
You're not buying your product.
Yes. But here's the liberating part, right? There is no understanding why something's popular. There's no science behind it. There's not even good market data, because views are based off of nothing. You don't know why someone viewed something. Mr. Beast gets, and I adore Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast gets 200 million views on his YouTube short. Maybe he gets 100,000 comments. That means that there's an absurd amount of people, we have no idea why they watched it. Was it up on their phone? Did their kids pull it up? There's nothing to base it off of. When we base it off of relevancy, it's like in business, right? When you're trying to do a startup, you want to get market feedback as quickly as possible, because if your product sucks, either make it better or go somewhere else and do something else, because that's liberating. It's absolutely liberating to not have to go down a path. But we've trapped ourselves in popularity, which is ambiguous and murky, and it doesn't make sense, and it's unpredictable. Think about all these people who have been successful, and you ask them why, and they go, well, I had a video go viral and I don't even know why. So I just tried to do more of that. That's a terrible way to live life. And I'm not insulting them. Capitalize on the moment. I'm just saying, in business, we're trying to have a deeper understanding and value proposition, right? And so the difference is that, popularity doesn't tell us whether a product is good or not. It only tells us if it's popular or not. But when it's relevant, if I'm in real estate and I'm selling a product to real estate agents and they stop buying it, that's a good thing for me, because now I know, okay, I got to change my product, or this product is no longer valid. Think of it like, I don't hear anybody complaining that nobody's riding horses anymore. The product changed, the needs changed, and that's okay. Henry Ford didn't mind.
No, I didn't.
I didn't mind. I'm glad it changed, and I'm glad people adapted to that change, because now I don't have to ride a horse. I get to drive a car. That's awesome. And so I look at that, and that's why I think I think that's a lot healthier, because when you study entrepreneurs, you'll see they're much more resilient. Real entrepreneurs, not the fake ones that just post on social media saying their life is successful. The ones working, they're so resilient because they're not taking it personal. They understand there's objectives. Okay, I got to pivot. I got to change. I got to do better. I've got to understand better. And that's good and that's healthy. That's how life really works. If my wife has a problem and I go, well, I'm not popular with my wife anymore, I guess, everything's over. Or if I'm listening and I say, okay, do I need to change, right? What's going on? What I'm giving my wife, do I need to change? What needs to happen to make this situation better? That's the way we should be thinking.
True. 100% agree. Or another way to phrase it is, if you're really worried about relevance and you're not changing to win more, you're staying on focus for your most relevant consumer.
And listen, we have seen so many companies that have failed because they wanted everyone, because they weren't satisfied. Their boards, often the boards, tell them, well, listen, we know that you've been catering to 55-year-old men for the last 100 years, but now we want you to go after 13-year-old girls with a totally different product that you have no experience on. You have no reason to be there. You're not even passionate about it. But listen, girls at that age are really influential. They will spend the money. They'll be really loyal. So go after them. And it's like, that's a terrible way to live. That's like the company's going to be miserable because they're making a product that they don't even believe in. I mean, look, I just pour into the people that you really want to change and be a part of their life, the deeper impact. They'll spend the money. They will. Look at the high-end luxury that provide unparalleled experiences. Logically, none of them should exist based off of the whole reach everyone. Logically, the way we're applying it to social media, none of those high-end, super, super narrow private jets, none of that should exist because they don't appeal to the masses or they can't be bought by the masses. And yet, and they've existed for a long time. We do.
I stayed in with that too.
Yeah. Man, this has been fun, Jamie. I have had a blast with you. Okay, so you teach your class. Just final words of a wisdom or food for thought for anybody listening about surviving or even thriving in the digital era.
Buckle up. So, as we've discussed, there's still a lot of change ahead. And as far as marketing in the social media sphere, it's early days and there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I firmly believe more and more transactions are going to happen online. And so I want to tell one story. Jonah Peretti, who is the father of viral video to me, he founded BuzzFeed. He founded HuffPost, and they discovered, one story that left an impression on me, and I think everyone would get a kick out of this, is he says that viral video, how do you recreate lightning in a bottle? And there are some formulas to it. And another digital executive in the social media space said 3 things. It has to be shareable, relatable, and so this one viral video that they realized was wildly popular and to a lot of people was a story of a woman who trained killer whales, trained them, fed them, and worked with orcas in tanks. Yeah. And she realized that everything she did to train those killer whales worked on her husband. And that article went wildly viral because we have spouses, we all manipulate, and it was shareable, relatable, and good.
I love that you said that too, because I was looking up the biggest Facebook groups. In my head, I knew exactly what they would be. Number 1 Facebook group, at least according to the site I was using, was marriage counseling. 7 million members, which is just hard to comprehend that number. 7 million members in a Facebook group. And then there were other ones like cheap meals, like 5 million members. And then you're like, wow, the biggest ones for the most part, like the top 5 biggest ones were everyday life things, everyday life problems.
Food and love.
Everyone wants a happy marriage. Everyone wants affordable food on the table. Wow.
Food and companionship, right? And then the number 1 TV shows are DIY home shows.
Which is crazy.
Shelter, love, and food.
You are awesome. I love every time we get to hang out and spend time together. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on.